And yeah, it's ugly. You know, people say beauty is in the eye of the beholder and stuff like that. I get it. You can find beauty in anything, for sure. But also, there's a nice alignment to things that feels good. And when things are where you expect them to be, doesn't that feel better? Okay, all right. Carcinization. I learned about this recently. This is a strange and odd but funny phenomenon in evolutionary biology where a bunch of undersea crustaceans have all slowly evolved towards the same flat, robust, crab-like shape because it seems to be the ideal form factor for surviving in the ocean. Oversimplified, it feels like everything down there is evolving towards a crab. And look at all these crabs. Lots of smartphones today basically look the same. So when something that comes along looks a little different, well, it's gonna feel weird, isn't it? But hey, maybe someone's into the layered glass look with the text in various places. Maybe you're into the red dot turning into a functional record light. Maybe you're into a bit of a lobster. Real talk though, it feels like every few months nothing comes out with a new product that looks crazy and people hate on all the pictures on the internet because they look weird. And then 2 months later, we're all used to it and we forget about the looks and we can focus on the product itself. So let's just skip all that and focus on the product. This is what Nothing is calling their first true flagship, which is what you would say if you're Nothing and you're charging $799 for a phone for the first time ever after rolling around in the budget and mid-range space for a few years. But I've been using this phone for the better part of the last week, and I'm gonna disagree with the whole premise here, actually. This is no more of a flagship phone than any of Nothing's previous phones. Now, are they lying to us? Not exactly, but kinda. Hear me out. $799 is the same price as the Samsung Galaxy S25, or the Pixel 9, or right underneath the iPhone 16. Like, they are competing against bona fide flagships from mega companies with basically unlimited money. And part of what we've come to expect from phones in this class is basically giving us the best available stuff. Like, it's kind of this unspoken rule. But if you're spending this much, you deserve to just get the best parts, right? That's why it's been so easy for me to rag on like the Pixel in the past for not having the best performance, or the iPhone for not having a high refresh rate display. So this Nothing Phone 3, it's certainly dressed up like a flagship, and it is the most flagship yet of any Nothing phone. It is huge. It's got this super bright, high refresh rate OLED display. It has a massive new silicon carbon battery, new triple 50 megapixel cameras, IP68 certification, up to 16 gigs of RAM. Like, it's got all the makings of what could be a flagship. But when you peel back the mask just a little bit, like right under the surface, it's the same exact strategy that Nothing has been running on all their previous phones in the past. The playbook is to just cut back just a little bit from the highest end stuff in ways that hopefully you, the buyer, don't notice, and it still feels like a flagship, but that allows them to cut costs and undercut the competition a little bit. So it works. It's not a bad strategy. It's allowed them to make great phones in the past, but it's just harder to sell that strategy at this price. So for starters, the chip inside, right? It's not the expensive, proven, powerful flagship Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. This is running the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 instead. It's one of the first phones we've seen using this chip, and to be fair, it is much better than anything we've seen in any previous Nothing phone. It's a 4nm chip. It's something like 40% better CPU and like 90% better GPU than the chip in the 2-year-old Nothing Phone 2. The phone is zippy and smooth as hell basically all the time, and I'll get to the software experience in a second. But is it the best available? Well, technically no. The Snapdragon 8 Elite still smokes this. You can see benchmark scores. It's pretty clear that's still the flagship chip. Now, you as a user might never notice that. In fact, you probably wouldn't if you just use the phone side by side in a lot of random normal activities. But if you happen to get into graphically intensive gaming or the most intense tasks, that's what separates a flagship from an upper mid-range chip. So for some context, some other phones using this chip, the Poco F7 and the iQOO Neo 10. Both of these are sub $500 phones. I also think they were very clever pairing it up with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage base. It's fast RAM, it's UFS 4.0, and then the upgraded version for $899 is 16 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte. Awesome to see that, but there is no 8128 version, and I think if they did make one, that would probably be like $699. but they didn't. Now, when we get to the outside of this phone, there is this, again, huge new AMOLED display. Surely it's a flagship display, right? It's gigantic, 6.67 inches corner to corner with perfectly even bezels all the way around. That takes extra work. It's a gorgeous AMOLED, nice color reproduction. And it's a good amount over 1080p. It's nice and sharp, smooth with that dynamic refresh rate up to 120 hertz. And it gets crazy bright, 1600 nits outdoors, 4500 nits peak brightness with HDR. So the numbers on paper go crazy, and it's such a nice screen to look at. I've loved using it. So what's the catch, Marquez? Well, one, you would literally never know this unless you check the spec sheet, but the glass protecting the front of this display, it's Gorilla Glass 7i, and that is a mid-range glass in their lineup where you might see flagships using the more durable Gorilla Glass Victus or Victus 2. And normally I wouldn't even bring that up, but that's definitely something to consider on a phone that is meant to spend a lot of its time face down. And then another thing, there are a lot of really nice subtle things that go into this screen. Like it has 1000 hertz touch sample rate, so it's even more responsive than the phone too. It also has 2160 hertz PWM dimming. It also has a very acceptable optical fingerprint reader down near the bottom, but it's also an LTPS display instead of the most premium LTPO. Now all that really means in practice is instead of varying the refresh rate from 1 to 120 hertz, it can go from 30 to 120 hertz. You would never notice, but it does mean a little bit worse power efficiency. I'll tell you what though, it can actually absolutely handle the slightly worse power efficiency because the battery in this phone is elite. It's marketed as a 5150 milliamp hour battery, but according to Nothing, and it gets complicated, but it's actually rated at a 5500 milliamp hour battery. It's silicon carbon, it charges extra fast at 65 watts. It supports wireless charging, reverse wired charging. It's great. It sips power in standby, and it's genuinely a 2-day phone if you want it to be, even without the more efficient Snapdragon 8 Elite. So honestly, flagship battery for sure. So then, okay, what about the cameras? Triple 50 megapixel cameras feels pretty flagship. And you know what? Again, it is closer to a flagship than any previous Nothing phone has ever been, but I've used this now for a little bit. It's still a notch behind the S25s and Pixel 9s and iPhone 16s of the world, the mainstream flagships that I'm comparing this to. This main sensor is the biggest they've ever used, 1/1.3 inches. It lets a ton more light in. And I'm shooting with this, and I realize as I'm looking through all the pictures I've taken, for some reason, it's frequently soft. Like even on a perfectly normal shot, the colors will be fine, the exposure will be fine, but the subject of the photo, when I zoom in, it should be in sharp focus, but it's just a little bit off. I think you can blame this a little bit on autofocus, maybe a little bit on tuning for a larger sensor with shallower depth of field. It's definitely capable of good pictures, and it's a little bit wider than you might expect, but yeah, that's a little bit odd. Then the telephoto is 3x, also a tiny bit soft sometimes, but also very useful. It's where your macro shots come from, and you can get some really sick, impressive close-ups. And the ultra-wide and the selfie cameras, they are the most consistent and most flagship of them all. But yeah, like I said, the whole camera setup is just one notch behind those things, and you may only notice if you're zooming in and pixel peeping. But again, that's the point. Mostly good enough for most people most of the time. I think with a little tuning, this can be an A- camera. I think a perfect encapsulation of the priorities of this phone are, look at this design. It's an insane design, but technically no camera bump. The rings obviously protrude a little bit, but most flagship phones at this point also have some sort of big camera bump that they all sit on. It turns out to get this whole big telephoto camera to not have a bump, they actually engineered part of the PCB or the board inside to have a hole in it so the optics could actually split, like punch through the PCB instead of being stacked totally on top of it. I'm sure we'll see this in like a JRig everything teardown video at some point. But yeah, basically mission accomplished. No camera bump. But that also meant they had to use some smaller parts to make it work, and this is actually a physically smaller telephoto than the cheaper Nothing Phone 3A Pro. So spoiler, the design is still the priority of this phone. Always has been. But let's talk about the most controversial bit of this design, which is the glyphs, which made Nothing phones famous for a couple years. This year, the glyph lights are gone, and replacing them is this small display on the back upper corner of the phone. It's 489 LED pixels. They're calling it Glyph Matrix. On its face, this has some usefulness about it, but then it's also surrounded by gimmicks. Okay, so the basic idea is like your phone is face down and then the lights on the back would light up and you could tell something about what that notification is to decide if you want to actually pick it up and check or not. So if that is all you're after, then okay, success. More pixels means more information. The new Essential Notifications Builder is super powerful and informative. It's better than ever before. I can set up a certain icon to come up in the dots whenever I get a certain type of notification or anything from a certain person or from a certain app. Let's say I want to be able to leave my phone face down, but I never want to miss any notifications from mom. Ever. Okay, set that up. No matter what she sends, no matter how she sends it, I will get an icon or a picture from my gallery or something that I can turn into dots and done. Anytime mom calls or texts or whatever, I can't see what they said, but I can see that she sent me something. So that's convenient. That's functional. Outside of that, it immediately starts feeling way more gimmicky. Like, okay, take another look at the back of this phone. You see this little dot here hidden in this design? This little circle is actually a pressure sensitive area. And when you press that, the back display lights up, and then you can use a single press to cycle through these glyph toys, and then a long press to actually engage with them. So you can cycle to a timer and then start a timer on the back of your phone, which doesn't sync up with the actual clock app. So if you turn your phone screen on, the timer disappears, so be careful. You can also use the back display as a viewfinder for your main camera, kinda. Or you can play spin the bottle. Maybe you're into that. Maybe you and your friends don't have a bottle handy, but you have your nothing phone. Or you can play rock, paper, scissors against your own phone. I think you get the idea. They're fun tech demos, but the utility runs out real quick. Now they have opened up the API, so developers, if they want to, can make more stuff for the back screen. With this phone, I don't really know how many actually will. Like, is Spotify gonna make like album art, cover art on the back of the phone here? I don't know. But the Nothing community has already started developing some stuff and messing with it. They've made this one. This is a magic 8-ball. So instead of turning your phone over and asking Google for a magic 8-ball, you can ask the back of your phone and it'll give you a little message. Cool. Look, the real best part of a Nothing phone is still the software on the front of the phone. Because Nothing OS 3.5, soon to be updated to 4.0, it's just great. Like, they have this tastefully modified version of Android with this nice aesthetic, finely tuned, smooth performance, and a handful of useful features that they just sort of sprinkle in there so you can sort of choose which ones you want to use or easily ignore. The AI-powered Essential Space continues to evolve and get more features, though it doesn't sync with anything externally, so I don't use it. And yes, there's still a custom button for it on the side of the phone, but it's not too in your face. You can ignore it if you don't want to use it. And the little things like being able to resize the quick settings toggles, or the way you can swipe up on the camera app to flip through presets. It's just so clean. It's clean, it's smoothly animated, and the whole OS is responsive in ways that feel higher end than the specs would ever suggest. I think the best new feature on this phone is the universal search box. So you might actually kind of get it confused because there's a permanent Google search box on the bottom of the home screen at all times. Not that search box, but when you pull up the app drawer, that search box. Now, that one searches through your stuff on your phone like usual, or you can ask it a question and hit that AI button and it'll use a modified version of Gemini to go online and pull up a short and sweet answer for you. It's tuned to kind of just be brief and give you answers to stuff. It's nice. And again, you can choose to use it or just never even try. You can just leave it tucked away and you can use it the way you normally do and just search for your apps on your phone. And this is also going to get updates. They're promising 5 years of major software updates. I could do the nitpicky thing and be like, oh, Samsung's doing 7 years and Apple does even more, so it's not quite a flagship, but you've seen how flagships kind of vary all over the board. So I'm giving them flagship credit for the software. So at the end of the day, is the title of this review a little dramatic? Maybe, sure. But flagship, the word flagship is being used here heavily as a marketing term. And so maybe the review title should just been Nothing Phone 3. They did marketing, whatever. But the point is, it still stands. They're charging $799 for this phone. And there are other really good phones that you can get for that much money.